Hi, folks. It's time. When the NIC guy said, "Do you want to do other talks?" I said, "Sure." I've got a great talk about Windows Server, the new Windows Server, and the new Windows. They said, "Cool, you can do that." They didn't tell me Sammy was doing the exact same talk, beforehand. But can't have everything. So the first half of this is Windows, which is going to sound a lot like what Sammy said. So if you were here for Sammy, then sorry. I'll go through that a little more quickly, and that'll give me time for server. That sound all right? Okay. I can't see any of you because of the lights. So if someone has a question, then just, speak right up. And can you hear me in the back? How's the sound sounding? I'm sounding soft to me. Anybody in the back who can't hear me, raise your hands. See, if you ask the right questions, you always get the right answers. All right, good. So, new versions of Windows coming. Well, eventually. New versions of desktop, new versions of server, they're coming at different times. The desktop version and the so-called mobile version, that's the official name, I think of it as the phone version. Yes, you've heard someone owns a Windows phone. I'm the guy, right? So the Windows Phone market share is creeping up on other. So, that's the hope. Server comes out in 2016. My guess is Microsoft likes to ship things in October. That means they get it done in time for Christmas. I want to know why they need to get Windows out in time for Christmas. I don't get that. Okay, how many of you ever bought your kids a laptop for Christmas? Like some of you, yeah, but it's not like, I'm just imagining a Christmas day and it's like a Microsoft commercial. And little 8-year-old Janie comes out, and under the tree, it's a package. She's smiling because she knows what's in it. And she rips it open, and she says, "Daddy, Daddy, Windows 10 upgrade." And Daddy's smoking the pipe. He says, "Yes, little one, and we'll put it on today." I just don't imagine that happening any Christmas. But maybe I just don't have the Christmas spirit. So it will not be a surprise when I say to you that Microsoft has what has been known as the even number curse, which is the reverse of the Star Trek movie Odd Number Curse, So anyway, that's where we were so far there. Now, why Windows 10? This is a big question I get all the time. Why Windows 10? What happened to Windows 9? Does anybody know? I have some theories and speculation. Ready? First of all, it really is Windows 9, but they used base 9. And 9 in Windows 9 is 10. Okay, how about this one? If they sold it in Germany, it'd be Windows 9! And that would be bad. You have to do this one with a William Shatner, James T. Kirk imitation. Must break curse of even numbered. So the thought here is, since our last model was success, failure, we have to assume the next one will be a success. Either that or they'll stop making them or something like that. So I think the reason that they did the Windows 10 was to distract the Gartner analysts from noticing the fact that there's no folders or hierarchy still in the new start screen. So there's just a big mess, As long as you only install something on the order. Sorry, I got my clock here. I got the clock working, or I will talk forever, and that would be bad. So, anyway, there's no hierarchy. Now, the story, somebody always says, "Oh, I know the answer," because there was a blog post by an anonymous person who said, "I'm a developer, former Microsoft developer, and the reason that we didn't do it was because too many installers look for the number 9, like Windows 95 or Windows 98. It's total nonsense. It's complete and total nonsense, but a lot of people believe it. I believe, though, that I've discovered what it is. Microsoft does actually not increment version numbers. It's not add 1, add 1, add 1. It's actually take the version numbers and multiply them, increase them by 17%. So Windows grows in compound interest, just like loans and savings. And if we do this, follow the math with me on this, okay? So now Vista was version 6, which rounds to 6. 6 times 1.17 is 7.02, which rounds to 7. 7.02 times 1.17 is 8.2, which rounds to 8. That times 1.17 is 9.6, which rounds to 10. Which means that unlike every other kind of software you've ever heard of, Windows grows geometrically, not arithmetically. That's a fact, Jack. Anyway, so new bits. I'll talk about where Windows is going. Cloud Connect is fun stuff. There's not that much fun stuff really, except I'm not going to talk about the user interface. I don't care about GUIs. You know what GUIs are? GUIs are fashion. People who are worried about the Windows 10 interface, half the people are going to be, I don't give a crap. And the other half are going to be, this is the worst thing since Satan. Windows 10 must die. And it all boils down to, I do everything with PowerShell anyway, so I don't care, you know. But, see, PowerShell doesn't change. It's a little like, oh, women's hemlines are coming up this year, you know. That's about what this comes back to. Padded shoulders are back for men. It'll change in the next version. I'll talk to you a bit about some changes in the command line, some new PowerShell stuff, and then, my friends, it's Thermopylae. Thermopylae all over. New browser called Spartan. Let's go through this quickly so I got time for server. Free Windows 10. If you have Windows 7 or Windows 8 or 8.1, you get a free upgrade. You can take it in the first year. It doesn't expire at the end of the year. Once you get it, you got it. It's just if you don't buy it within the first year, then it's, ha-ha, suckers, you got to pay for it. Unless, of course, you have enterprise Windows, because those clients aren't important or something. Granted, they probably have a software assurance license, so they're getting anyway, but not all of them. I mean, really, who uses enterprise, right? So, also, what we're seeing is a rapid progression to the fact that Windows Pro, well, first of all, Windows Ultimate's gone. Windows Professional is getting less and less important. And I think pretty soon we're going to have Windows Home and then Windows Enterprise. And if you want to get anything done, you have to get Windows Enterprise, which is irritating because I like to buy my software rather than rent my software. So, also, support numbers. There's a recent blog post that said they'll support any version of Windows for 10 years, but what that really means is 5 years for free and 5 years for extended support. They think we're upgrading it's interesting. Microsoft has been making better and better software. Think about if you ever bought a car, or your father told you about buying a car in the early 60s, 1960s. The car was good for 3 or 4 years and dead at that point. I mean, rusted or useless. Now we buy cars that are reliable enough that we keep them for 20 years. Software's like that too. With Windows 3.1, you wanted to get rid of it. You're like, please give me Windows 95. I'm begging you, give me Windows 95. When we get to the point where the software is reliable, we're saying, wait a minute, I'm kind of okay with this, you know? This XP thing. I have a lot of friends that you pry XP out of their cold, dead hands, you know? And it seems that if we're going to make more reliable software, they should be supporting it for longer rather than shorter. That's just me, okay? What about Windows RT? I like Windows RT. I have a Surface 2, and I think it's an awesome tool, except that Mark Rusinovich is not allowed to write Zoom it for it. That's the only thing I'm missing. It's great. It's lightweight. I love the type cover. But they're not talking about a Windows 10 for it. However, I did find a blog post where a Microsoft official from Windows said, Windows RT is not dead yet. The last time I heard that was about something called OS 2, and, well, if you don't know what I'm talking about, then you know where RT's going. So, Windows as a service. I have to disagree with Sammy. If you were in Sammy's talk, Sammy told you that Microsoft's not trying to make you rent Windows. I do not agree with that. We've seen that, first of all, things have changed. Microsoft is talking about Windows 10 being the last Windows out there, and they'll just keep bumping it up. And we've seen this coming. Windows Update took on larger loads. It does service packs now. I mean, here's one example. This is today's. This morning, I got up, I turned my computer on. I said, you know, I'm going to be turning my computer on in front of like 1,200 people. I don't want to have to shut it down and wait 25 minutes for some updates. Let's just see. And I was like, holy shit. I thought, that's not Photoshopped. I thought, there's something wrong here, you know? So apparently Windows Update can take on bigger and bigger loads. Either that or it's Microsoft's approach to be a denial of service attack on the internet, something like that. So first service packs, then complete operating system upgrades. I don't know about you guys, but does anybody here use Windows 8? Is it just me? Oh, okay, good. So that update from Windows 8 to 8.1 wasn't bad at all. You know, the update one wasn't bad either, and neither was update 2. So I mean, I had pretty good luck with it. You know, when Windows 10, beta versions are being delivered. Is anybody running Windows 10? Okay, yeah, I mean, if you put yourself on the fast track, there's interesting stuff there. So in theory, this is the last Windows, as I said, and it'll just be upgrades for now. No surprise, Microsoft just the other day registered a domain called Windows365.com, Windows365.com. I wonder what happens on February 29th. Anyway, so I actually said that when Office 365 came out. That was my joke. It was in 2007 or something like that. And I said, what about next year when it's February 29th? And everybody said, ha, 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 Azure crashed on February 29th. And this Microsoft guy called me and said, you made this happen. I said, I was just predicting. I was just predicting. It's not my fault. It's not my fault. Windows 365, look, what are they doing with Office? They want to sell you Office. They're not putting the gun to you and at your head and making you do it, but they really want to sell you subscription Office. I believe they're going to do that with Windows as well. Let's be clear. If Microsoft is never going to make another version of Windows, and if they want is a little bit of support money from me every year, I'll give them $3. I don't know. I mean, clearly somebody's got to, do the fixes. So, desktop unification. We have a number of things going on. There's the two desktops, the desktop, which runs the applications we run, and then the start screen, which runs those Metro or modern apps. And those things, it's a little interesting the way that works. If you've run Windows 8, you know that it's weird because there's two desktops. There's the desktop with the big things for your fingers and the desktop that needs a mouse. It's very strange. You give this to someone who's been a Mac user forever, she's going to look at this and say, wait a minute. So I got to use my finger on this desktop, and I use the mouse on this desktop. Huh? They say, well, so there's two desktops. There's the one where I get to use my finger, and then there's the one where I want to give you the finger, right? So we have two desktops, separate but unequal, my friends. We eradicated that in my country in the 1950s. So that's why it's nice that Windows 10 solves this, and we can put them both on the same desktop. A unification of the desktop and an end to apartheid in our time. Platform gets more unified. There's going to be something called Windows 10 on my phone that supposedly is the same operating system. I find that hard to believe, but they claim that they're going to be doing that. You'll be able to build universal applications. Those of you running Windows 10, get on the store. You can download the universal versions of Word and Excel and PowerPoint, and they're actually quite some fun. So they definitely do give them a shot. The other universal part, management. The management story for a phone is what? Very minimal. What can you do with a phone? Lock down the browser, remote wipe, stuff like that. What can you do with a computer? Group policies. It drives me crazy that I get this kind of control with group policies and this much control with Intune. But you get the distinct feeling that Microsoft wants to see everything on Intune. Because if I take this computer, which is currently joined to a physical terrestrial Active Directory, if I connect it instead to an Azure Active Directory, which I'll talk about in a moment, then I go from group policies to Intune, which is sad. But anyway. You can now join a domain in the cloud. My friends Raymond Cornelius and Sander Burkow are going to do a talk about this, the second to last session tomorrow. And I saw them frantically working at it. So it's going to be a good talk, I'm sure. So if you have Windows 10 and you have an Azure Active Directory, they are free. If you have Office 365 and you have updated to the latest version of Office 365, then you already have an Azure Active Directory that shadows your Office 365. Activate that. Flip a switch that says that you can do joining. And at that point, you start the thing up, and you're going to see in the soft control panel, look in System, and under About, is Connect to Cloud. At that point, you're logging in with your Office 365 or your Azure AD, whatever account it is. And so some interesting stuff you can do there. Benefits that you get are your settings roam with you. That's nice. You get access to work folders, to Azure Storage, actually. And you get that benefit where you can log on with just a PIN. So you fire up your Windows 10 box, and all you need is just, you can either actually get a code off of your phone, or you log in with just a PIN or a fingerprint. So, Windows Store. Those of you running Windows 8, it's weird putting Windows 8 apps on a Windows 8 system if you're in a corporation. The idea that if I work for IBM or Exxon, that I can't get into my Windows 8 box until I tell it my Hotmail account is insane. Hotmail account, Live account, Outlook account, those are so-called MSAs, Microsoft accounts. You can curate the store to create something called a business software portal. This is a great improvement. First of all, you can now log in with your organizational ID rather than having to do Hotmail or something along those lines. Also, you could create a store where you can throw away most of the games and the other crap you'd find in public, leave in a few professional apps you care about, and then add your own apps as well. Now, normally that has required System Center and some money, of course. You can do it with MDT now, or you can even just do it with emails, where you deliver emails to the user that says, click here to install the apps that you need. You can also pre-install apps. All that making sense? Okay, good. Now, my favorite user interface gets better, and by that, I am talking, of course, about the command prompt. Command prompt, just really quickly. If you stretch a command prompt window, it reflects that in the buffer. That's nice. It knows word wrap. Have you ever cut and pasted from a command prompt? You got to go edit, mark, and it marks this block of text. That doesn't happen now. You just start marking text with Control M, and then it stretches and it understands what lines are. The familiar old Control C to copy, Control V to paste works, and Control X does not work yet, but it will. There's a bunch of others here you can look at later. You'll be able to get the recording with this. Shift in combination with right and left, or up and down, or page up and page down. So very easy to mark stuff. Does anybody here have a Surface Pro? The Surface Pros have got gorgeous screens, very high resolution, but when you set a type font, you got a really tiny command prompt. It knows that. It now knows the DPI of your screens and adjusts things accordingly. Okay? You can make the command line window transparent. I don't know why anyone cares about that, but you can certainly do that. One of my favorites is, I got in a lot of trouble a while back. I was doing a class and someone wanted to see a demonstration of something, and I didn't have the ability to demonstrate it easily, so I copied and pasted it out of my PowerPoint, and it never worked. PowerPoint into PowerShell was powerless. Well, the problem, of course, is that PowerPoint makes those smart quotes. Well, in the text world, we don't want to see that. It took me a good 20 minutes to look like an idiot in front of my class. So what this does is when you copy something with smart quotes, it fixes those quotes automatically. And you can turn these features on and off. If you go to your properties, you've seen options and fonts and layouts and colors. Experimental lets you play with all these things as well. Okay? Here's one GUI slide. This is what Control Panel. Control Panel now has a split personality. There's the old Control Panel with the thing like Device Manager in it, but then they have this modern app version that is slowly increasing in value. This is its current level. Microsoft Notice is getting more and more minimal when it comes to icons as time goes on. You don't call it Control Panel, it calls itself Settings, whatever. So, not a new PowerShell stuff. If you look at the PowerShell 5 stuff, you can get a chance to see these things. The dash item commandlets have the ability to add dash symbolic link. There's a one-liner now that will install applications. There's support for zip files, encryption, other kinds of really, really groovy stuff. If you poke around PowerShell, you can see that there's some new nouns that they're not talking about. File share seems to point to a new and improved file sharing server that we haven't seen yet. PNP device lets us directly control, disable, etc. Plug-and-play devices. That will be good for AppLock, the hardware version of AppLocker. And AppX volume is probably the way that we're going to be delivering things into the store beforehand. With Windows 10, comes with a second browser. That's not a surprise. My browser comes with a second browser as well. So, it's called Spartan, and it's less Chrome, standards-based, stuff like that. So, let's talk about Server. Lots of new goodies in Server. Let's talk about these guys. First of all, Windows, you know that Windows 8 has come with not only anti-spyware, but antivirus as well in the form of Defender. Server never got that. It gets it now. A copy of Defender is in every server. And just like with Windows 8, it has the early launch anti-malware protection, and you can always do secure boot with UEFI. So it's a bad time to be a malware writer. Server also gives us JIA, JIT and JIA, just in time, just enough administration. I know Jeff Snover was here last year or the year before. He may have talked about this, but basically here's the idea. We need to be able to delegate. I need to be able to say, you have the ability to restart that SQL server. You have the ability to change people's titles. You have the ability to, we want to be able to dial down to very, very small amounts of packets of functions. JIA lets us do that. Here's what it does. It lets you go to a server, create a local account, give that account some small set of powers. and then I get to them remotely through a remote run space. Kind of like if you've ever done PowerShell, a remote session. So the notion is, I'm somebody who needs just the ability to restart a SQL server. You don't want me to let to do anything else with that SQL server. So you hand me, essentially, a link, an icons, something like that. That lets me connect to the SQL server, puts me in a box where I'm now an administrator, but I'm only an administrator who could restart SQL servers. See what I'm saying? So I can lock down. I use constrained endpoints, and I create templates, and more specifically, here's what happens. First of all, it's being done through PowerShell. PowerShell is very unusual for this because PowerShell has the ability to be able to control everything you type. So the first thing, you can restrict the user to a set of commandlets. If there are 4,000 commandlets on your server, maybe you only want the one that lets you restart a service so they can restart SQL. So step one, restrict the number of commandlets. That's called the language. Step two, all these commandlets have parameters. You can control the number of parameters. You could say you could have only one parameter. Step three, the data that you feed to them, you can cut down on. So for example, if I gave you the command restart-service, there isn't a command like that, but let's call it restart-service, that when you passed a parameter to it, you could only pass the parameter SQL. I could say something like that, using regular expressions for these things. Now making sense? Simple example, there is a command in Active Directory called set-aduser. I could change your name, I could change your office, I could change your title, etc. Maybe I want to give you, you're in HR, the ability to change people's titles. I give you access to Active Directory, but only one commandlet, set-aduser. There's lots of parameters, dash given name, dash surname, etc. But you can only have dash title. So that's what I'd be able to do. Making sense? Questions, anybody? Okay, good stuff. Just in time. Just in time goes on top of GIA. So what happens with GIA? I parachute you into a magic box on a remote server where you're an administrator that can only do one thing. Maybe I want to control how long you stay in that box. What just in time does is just in time says I'm giving you access to that box and the clock is ticking. Or I'm giving you access to that box only between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. or something along those lines. It is based on Microsoft's Microsoft Identity Manager. If that sounds unusual, it used to be called Forefront Identity Manager. Before that it was known as Microsoft Meta Directory Services. Before that it was, well anyway, so that'll be the basic tool for that. We don't know much about it. We haven't seen much about that as of yet. If you saw Ben Armstrong's talk, I did not, but I imagine Ben talked about these things. Hyper-V is the #1 story for server, has been, will continue to be, because it is the infrastructure, it's the dial tone, it's the warp and woof. We got rolling cluster upgrades. If you have a Hyper-V cluster running 2012 R2, it becomes very easy to roll it up to 2016. Snapshots we've always known about, Microsoft never supported them in production. They're now called production checkpoints, and they can be done. One of the tricks about how they work is that when you restore a production machine, the operating system knows, the virtual machine knows that it's been restored, and it can make adjustments appropriately. Additionally, you may know that with Windows 2012, Server 2012, we got something called REFS, and that was a reliable file system. That has a lot of nice features, but it's having a slow growth path. Microsoft said it was experimental, basically, except for SQL loads. They're now saying that it works for Hyper-V. It's been rebuilt to work particularly well with VHDs and VHDXs. So you're going to get better performance out of this. I don't have time. I wish I had time to talk about REFS in detail. I just want to say a few things about it quickly. REFS uses something called copy on write, which means if we're in the middle of rewriting something on the meta directory and you pull the plug, no problem. What you did was roll back. You didn't lose the... Normally, if there are places on an NTFS volume that if you scribble on them, the whole volume's gone. Screw with the super block, you're screwed. Screw with the spare block, you're screwed. Screw with the root directory, you're screwed. Screw with the bitmaps. Not with REFS, though. They're constantly testing these things by pulling the plug out of servers in the middle of doing things. Another thing, when you need to fix something with check disk, you never have to take your system offline. No reboots to do check disk repairs. So lots of really good stuff about REFS. Do start looking at it. Only a few of you said you had a Surface. Do any of you have a Windows 8 laptop that supports connected standby? There's not too many of them out there. If you do, though, if you turn on Hyper-V, you lose connected standby. That is now fixed. Okay. As time goes on, integration services which go into your virtual machines get changed. They have to be changed. You can now fix that, or you don't have to fix it, because that's now delivered by Windows Update. So Windows Update will update your integration services. That is good stuff. The Hyper-V Manager, it's troublesome to offer alternate credentials on that currently. That is fixed in this version as well. Many things you could do from the host. From the host, you can now add a NIC to a virtual machine while the virtual machine's running. Hot add. Didn't have that before. Even better, when you create it, you can give it a name that the virtual machine sees. So if you want to call it vNIC7, you're at the host. Inside the virtual machine, you can now start doing PowerShell commands against vNIC7. You don't have to first install it and then rename it as you had to previously. Machine configuration and machine status information files used to be XML. Apparently, on big clusters, that's a bottleneck. Updating, that's a bottleneck. So Microsoft's gone to a binary format on both of those. Why do you care? If you have a big Hyper-V cluster, you're going to see improved performance. That's all you care about. Generation 2 VMs, which were built specifically in 2012 R2 for a higher performance, much faster setup virtual machines, are great. They support UEFI, which means you can have virtual machines that have secure boot, which is a very good thing, but Linux never supported it. We now have Linux support for that stuff. Additionally, many people, more and more, Microsoft's given us the capability to take our clusters and make geo-clusters out of them. Clusters where we have chunks of them in different places in the country or across the world. That leads to the witness issue. And if you don't know how clusters work, I'm doing a talk first thing tomorrow morning. You might want to join me. I will catch you up to speed from 1998 to now in 60 minutes on clusters. Anyway, when a cluster is confused, we use an external reference called a witness to see if things are actually bad or not. That's usually just a file share. But in a multi-location situation, that's weird. Azure can now provide witnesses. And while I'm on the topic, if you currently, I'm assuming that most of you are a VMware shop. Is that correct? Let me see your hands. Okay. How many of you doing Hyper-V? Okay. So is anybody experimenting with Hyper-V, thinking about using it? I'm a VMware guy that's become enamored of Hyper-V because it's, the price on everything is just so much cheaper. That's really what excites me about it. If you want to start moving your systems over, they have the Microsoft Virtual Machine Converter, which I said at the keynote had been a problem a few years ago. It's quite good now. The version 3 has a GUI that only works if you're coming off of a VMware ESX server. But there are some PowerShell commandlets that just make this. That's an example of how simple it is, and it's gosh darn fast. Really, really, really something to look at. If you haven't been following, Microsoft's story is this. Think of Server 2012 as a missile. It's a missile aimed straight at VMware. Because what's in Server 2012? A brand new, really cool hypervisor. Fantastic remote access that we didn't have before. Lots of standards-based stuff. In order to have a VMware or cluster of any kind, you typically needed a SAN, and SANs are not cheap. Storage Spaces was built into Server 2012, and its job was to let you build SANs cheap. The whole point is you're not buying specialized hardware, you're buying generic stuff, plugging some things together, getting some SAS drives, and costs 25% of the cost of a SAN and gives you 75% of the capacity. That changed in 2012 R2, we got more features, and in this one, we got 2 features that brings it almost to SAN parity. And there's a new kind of cluster that is so dirt cheap to run compared to SANs, you're going to want to play with it immediately. I need to warn you, because I'm an MVP, I know a lot of things about this that I can't talk about. The reason I'm staying on my slides is that I know a lot of things that if I say them will get my ass kicked. So I'm trying to stay on the parts that will keep me from not being a former MVP. I would hate to lose my MVP-ness, so to speak. So, all right, that didn't come out the way I meant. But anyway, so Microsoft's got a SAN. It's called Storage Spaces. You may have heard the phrase IOPS, input operations per second. You can now do quality of service. You know QoS lets you control internet bandwidth. IOPS QoS lets you say, okay, this SAN should give 30% to this guy, 30% to this guy, 40% to that guy. And it actually works. But that's not the cool feature. To make you understand the cool feature, let's talk about what this looks like now. So this is the most super simplified version of a Hyper-V cluster that you could have. So I've got a Hyper-V cluster. What does that mean? 2 Hyper-V boxes. They're both running Hyper-V, and they are collectively supporting a bunch of virtual machines. Where are the virtual machines living? They're living on hard drives. But they don't live here and they don't live here. They live somewhere in the middle. And so right now in the Microsoft world, that's somewhere in the middle is you go spend about $5,000 for that box. It's basically a box that lets you shove drives into it. You're going to use SAS drives, not SATA drives. And why? Because the drives in the box are accessible to both computers. They have a bus that lets more than one computer hook up to it. That's not true with SATA. So the first part, there's our Hyper-V servers. They need a place to store their VHDs, virtual hard drives, and that's these guys. Now this is a dumb box. It's just a JBOD, just a bunch of disks. You shove the disks in there, hook them up to a couple more computers. These are a cluster. I have 2 servers there. Why? In case one guy dies. The job of these machines is to take this data and share it. So we have a cluster inside a cluster. There's a file server cluster holding onto those valuable VHDs, which then presents to a Hyper-V cluster. Is that making sense? This is a special kind of file server, just appeared in 2012, called a scale-out file server for application data. There's somebody at Microsoft whose job it is to come up with sexy names for things, and he's obviously still firing on all cylinders. Okay? So, this is great, because in the old days, what was this? Lots of EMC, lots of some kind of SAN, left hands, whatever. Expensive stuff. This is cheaper, this is good, this is 2012 R2. But wait, there's more. Now Microsoft says, hey, forget the SAS, forget the expensive box, let's just get crazy. These are just regular old 2016 file servers, and they've got hard drives in them. You could put an enclosure on them if you wanted to. But the idea is, these are just machines with hard drives in there. And guess what kind of hard drives? SATA drives. Big and cheap. And if you have enough of them, you don't care that the mean time between failure on a SAS drive is 10 to the 16th seconds. Mean time between failure on a SATA drive is 10 to the 15th seconds. Okay, yes, SAS is 10 times more reliable. How many seconds is 10 to the 15th seconds? You'd be lucky if you're breathing when that happens, okay? So the beauty here is we can take the cheap drives, stick them in some cheap servers, and they collectively look out for each other. So you can have as many drives in there as you like. Currently, Storage Spaces supports pools of 80 drives. The guy in charge of it said publicly, so I'm not going to get barbecued for this, that, quote, we're looking at making that much larger. I said the exact words, they can't touch me. SATA drives, another nice thing about it, the way this has worked, the way this works is no SAS, so we're saving money. All internal drives can contribute anything. A friggin' USB stick could be part of this. Enlarges the storage space pool size, focused on Hyper-V, focused on REFS, focused on VHD, focused on VHDXs. This is the first workload for it. This is the first workload for it. Here's the interesting thing. This keeps 2 copies. Therefore, if you lose 1 disk, you're okay. If you lose 2 disks, you're okay. But because it's aware of which drives are in which chassis, when it's laying out space, it makes sure that not only can you survive 1 drive loss, not only can you survive 2 drive losses, you can survive an entire computer losing. How much cheaper is this going to be than the massive SANs you're paying for now? This is an incredibly exciting, I don't get out much, okay? But I mean, this is incredibly exciting. This means for my customers, people that are medium-sized businesses, they've already invested some money in big VMware. I love VMware, I'm not picking on it. It's just expensive. Microsoft is clearly trying to drive them out of business. They probably won't be able to, but it's going to be tougher times for them. So the first thing that was cool was that we made storage in a cluster cheaper. The second thing is storage replication. Anybody here, are any of you the SAN people where you work? Got a few SAN people. The SAN people will know when I say LUN replication, you guys are nodding your heads. What that means is you've gone out and spent $75,000 on a SAN, but there's this one box that's got the drives in it. Sure, it's got RAID and stuff, but what if, bam, a lightning bolt goes right through the box? Fine, the SAN vendor says, I have such a deal for you. Give me another $75,000 and some extra software. We'll have two of them, and they'll look out for each other. It works, as long as you have a lot of money. Storage replication. Microsoft, when I talk to people about this, they say, no, there's no LUN replication. This is better. It's volume replication, and it's not DFS. Oh, no, oh, no, oh, no. It's gosh darn fast. It lets you replicate any kind of volumes that you want. You could be replicating between an EMC SAN and a left hand or something like that. All the work is being done. What used to be the SAS fabric is now being done by SMB3, the complete overhaul of SMB that does some really, really interesting things. All goes over port 445 or 445. They're talking about fabrics of gigabits per second, 40 gigabits per second, which is going to be faster than SAS in the first place. And latency such that if you have one location within, say, 16, 20 kilometers of another location, if you've got good enough bandwidth, you can actually do DR. Essentially, they specifically say it's not DR, but it's really fast offsite stuff, pretty impressive stuff. You can do asynchronous versus synchronous replications, and that's where we come down to whether we're really close or asynchronous. Because if you want to say, wait a minute, Mark, I want that storage replication to be in a different continent, you can do that. That's asynchronous replication. But if you're saying, hey, it's just 10 kilometers down the road, we got a fast pipe, that's synchronous. Making sense? Exciting things to talk about. I know lots more about it, and it's really exciting. MultiPoint Server is a version of terminal server that's been around for a long time, useful in classrooms. It is wonderful. You buy one cheap box, you get these USB things where you can plug in a screen and a keyboard and a mouse, and you can have 32 students with a workstation all sharing the same machine. You can do cool stuff like let students share machines. The teacher can put his or her machine on everybody else's machine or bring a student's machine up. This has been wonderful stuff. It's now in the box. And I can see a lot of situations that are not just teaching where this could be fun stuff to have. Networking changes, not big stuff. DNS gets policies where IPAM's going to support those things, etc. I have just a few minutes left, so I've been asked to remind you that right afterwards, I'm going back to the main hall, and a number of the speakers will be doing Ask the Experts. And the way they're going to take questions, I guess they figure that you Norwegians are shy and you don't want to speak up. So they did it with Twitter before. They're going to do it with emails now. So if you have questions, do join us. I believe there's alcohol, so do join us. Send questions to ask@nicconf.com. Ask@nicconf.com. So 60 minutes was not a lot of time. I appreciate you guys for coming. It's odd that they ended up giving Sammy the Windows desktop talk, which was the same as the first half of my talk. I hope that I taught you some things about server you did not know about. Please don't forget the evaluations. Please join me tomorrow for the clusters thing. And other than that, remember to use this knowledge for good. Thank you so much, and not evil. Bye-bye. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take them. I kind of got to get downstairs, but if anybody's got a burning question right now, I'm more than happy to. All right? Thank you all.
Okay. Please stay seated.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. I would like to thank you for a remarkable... I would thank you for a remarkable presentation. It's been an honor to listen to you, Mark. So here's a gift from me.
Oh, you guys are too good. Give it. Bring it here, buddy. Thanks, guys. Downstairs. See you downstairs. A few minutes. Thank you, sir. Thanks so much.
Congratulations. And please take a vote when you go outside through the main exit.